Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Dungeons and Distancing, Keeping the Dice Rolling During COVID. With us, some of the Orcs DMs. I thought I'd start by telling everyone what Orcs is, because it's a fairly unique kind of business model. So Orcs is the brainchild of eminent Portland restaurateur and longtime fantasy fan, Chef Anthony Caffiero. He created pop-up taverns where the orcs take over a bar, and each table has a professional dungeon master there that leads players new and old through fast-paced, fun, one-shot adventures that match a theme of the month. It happened every month for a couple years. We're on a pause right now for obvious reasons. And gaming comes with a meal that also matches the theme of the night, and there's often a signature cocktail list. Regulars continue to level up. Friendships are made. Strangers follow the Orcs mantra to get drunk, roll dice, and have fun. And I thought we would introduce ourselves because we're going to be doing a lot of talking, and including a question from Jack N, which is, how did you get into D&D? So, Michaela?
Well, I'm Michaela, pronouns they, she. I'm also McBoots42 on Twitter, and I got started playing Dungeons & Dragons with a group of friends out in a really small town where the 5 or 6 people who made up that group were the only ones who played D&D at the time. So from there, I found that I really wanted to be a dungeon master because I'm a native storyteller, and I said I would never be a writer, so I was like, dungeon mastering will be fine. And from there, it just took off.
Awesome. Dana?
Yeah, so I'm Dana. My pronouns are she, her. I've actually been playing D&D for over 25 years. So I am technically an OG player, but I've played every edition, and I've played Pathfinder 1. I've read Pathfinder 2, but I haven't gotten the chance to run it yet.
And Dan?
Hi, Dan, he, him. I moved towns and needed friends. And then I also wanted to play D&D because it was appealing and I thought I might like it. So I went on the internet and found a meetup group, and then I made friends and learned how to play 2nd edition in 2011. So I don't know if that makes me OG, but I know what THACO is. And then I moved towns again, and I played Pathfinder 1, and then 5e came out, and I played that, and I've been doing that ever since. And I design escape rooms and run a company in town, and then I have my own company, which is mysteries by mail delivery kind of escape rooms in a box called Puzzling Package.
Awesome. And I'm going to be kind of emceeing this. My name is Law Johnson. I, too, have been in the D&D scene for about 25 years, like Dana. I started when I was 9 years old playing the AD&D Yellow Box on a camping trip with one of my lifelong best friends, and it's stuck ever since. I kind of entered the visible D&D scene by making memes about 8 years ago, and they got really big. Then, of course, all of us are Orcs DMs for the Orcs events, and I'm the creative director of Slapdash Studios. We make the League of Ultimate Questing, which is a comedy action play podcast where adventuring is a major league sport. So that's who we are, and now we're going to discuss how basically social distancing has changed the way that we experience Dungeons & Dragons as both players and DMs, whether it's for the better or for the worse. So our first topic that we had listed here was scheduling. Do we feel like we're playing more frequently or less frequently than before social distancing started? Open table.
I'm playing more.
I'm playing a lot more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing about the same, because even before we had to move remote, I was doing pretty much only remote games except for Orcs.
Right. Michaela does a lot of remote play and Twitch streaming. And
Mhm.
so I think it's a slightly different move for some of the rest of us that are more analog. Before COVID, I was only an in-person player. And so especially as a professional DM, commuting is the biggest cost that I incur and the biggest limitation on whether or not I can take a job. And without that factor, with everyone else kind of being more willing to move to remote play, I'm getting a lot more games in right now than I've ever had.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like I'm playing more and DMing less. Like all my DMing is doing like the professional stuff. I haven't been doing it like recreationally for a minute now because all my friends wanted to start running games because it's easy online, and so now I get to play. What a fun twist!
That's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, I can thank Dan for part of that. So it sounds like most of us are getting to play more often. I suppose you can assume that there's a lot of ease in scheduling games online as opposed to, like Dana said, traveling, especially carrying equipment. We all know that one like 30-pound bag full of books and miniatures and stuff.
Well, I would say a lot of it is just free time and friends having free time.
Mhm.
And there's not that one sort of cursory event that, oh, that I'm not free that Wednesday. Can we do next Wednesday? And then the other person's like, oh no, I'm getting. So many people have free time, and there's no other events going on.
Right.
And everybody misses each other so much that this is the only way to do it, because you can only video chat about what you've been doing when you haven't been doing anything for so long.
Right.
So having an activity is one of the only ways that I connect with friends.
Sure. There's certainly no concerts that are like interfering with anything, and a good percentage of people aren't using their normal work hours, 9 to 5 and stuff like that anymore. So definitely. And that kind of leads into the next topic, which is coordination. Does running or showing up for games prove to be easier or more challenging than it used to be? Sounds like we've covered this a little bit, but how do you guys feel?
I think the only problem is people forgetting what day of the week it is. It's not, oh, I made other plans. It's, I just didn't realize that it was Thursday today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Right.
Yeah.
I haven't noticed a difference in that regard.
And for like streaming, like doing the live games, do you feel like you get a better turnout than you did before, or you feel like it's about the same?
Ooh. I personally haven't been streaming D&D. I've kind of taken a break from streaming because it's I'm already a little exhausted from
Sure.
coronavirus and quarantine and everything, so I'm rather than like trying to manage all of that, just kind of running games for people off camera, off stream.
Definitely. Like for me, I'm noticing like just watching, it's weird like getting lost in the algorithms for like people listening to the podcast, for example. We noticed a big dip in the beginning, and we realized it was because a lot of people listened during their drive to work, and that didn't happen anymore. So even like the hours.
That's true. That's when my partner listens to your show.
Oh, I didn't know. That's awesome. Okay.
That's typically when I listen to all my D&D podcasts too, striving.
Yeah, I feel like we all have a lot more time now, though. It just took a minute for everyone to realize, like, I might as well start listening to new podcasts and watching new streams and stuff.
Yeah.
So as far as the process of running online games versus in person, how about the involvement? Do you feel like you're more connected to the game or less connected not being face-to-face with the players?
Okay, involvement in terms of connection with players. Running online is definitely challenging in a lot of ways. Where it's stronger is really in the tools and not in the interactive sense. Just because one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of my players is they tend to mute their mic when they're not talking. And so what I find is that especially at kind of comedic points in the adventure where I am used to kind of gauging the room based on, the reaction and the laughter, now I have to make sure I pay real close attention to the little windows there, along the edge of my screen. They're, laughing with their mic muted.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people accidentally start talking over each other just because you can't read the timing. There's always like a 3-second delay with broadcasting to each other. I'm sure you'll see some of that during the stream.
I agree with that, and I think that we spoke about it the other day, that just being able to pick up on the vibe of where people are at and are your players engaged is tough, because are they also getting an email that might be a job or like have they also planned to have food delivered or something like that? And so there's not a communal, okay, now all of the food's here for everybody. But at the same time, if I'm running a campaign and Michaela and Dana are sort of in the middle of the action and Law's off to the side, how engaged is he and what do I need to do? And it's really easy for me to forget that he's there because he's not there, and focus on kind of this scene, which theoretically leaves him out. And where is everybody at sort of mentally that day? Because there is so much more stress on everybody that there's only so much focus that this can take if you're not directly involved. So it is challenging with not having people there. But I think, Dana, you're right. Throwing in levity is always good. Always.
And some DMs I know have a rule of like no screens at the table for distraction, which, is different for every table and based on the people who are there. But like, how do you all feel? Like, do you suspect that your players are more frequently like, browsing Facebook while they're playing your game or doing Farmville or something?
I definitely have something to speak to that. So I, in quarantine, have started pretty much being an exclusive Dungeon Master babysitter. So all my groups are 10-year-olds and families, and they're loving it. So we've had to make quite a few adjustments to a virtual play style to accommodate that age group. And what I've found most helpful, which I think also translates to how I roll tables in real life, in person, is that if you take away, so if somebody's high energy or has ADD or autism or you don't know what, and they're like fidgeting or drawing or even scrolling through Facebook, they might actually still be more engaged than if you took those things away and they had to just kind of sit and wait their turn.
Exactly.
So as an accessibility tool, I just have an open rule that's like you can get up and go and take breaks. You can draw, you don't have to like be looking at your screen, and I think that frees everybody up just like emotionally and mentally to be really present.
And I in my experience, it's not something I really pay attention to, and with my adult players I haven't noticed any like kind of major distraction or anything, but I agree with you completely. Earlier this year I ran the Kids D&D program for Washington County. And kids can get really distracted on the internet. Like I had them going all over the place, and they're still engaged. But like one of them wanted to find like a voice synthesizer to read off like what they wanted their character to say and all these things. And like and they'll run off and spend some time looking for it and kind of be distracted. But it's as long as people are having a good time and like engaging with the game.
Yeah,
I think that's one thing I've been thinking about a lot. And every time I talk about sort of doing this, is the most important thing, in my opinion, is having fun. So what do your players want out of the game? Do they want to have a social time? And do you need to spend 45 minutes catching up about what's been going on in your lives because you guys are buddies? Or are your players buddies and you're not? And do they need to kind of have that? And is breaking momentum more important for them, and they don't even realize it, than staying focused on the game? Because more so now than ever, it's about bringing people together and chatting and interacting with people as much as you can. So if you are there to hang out with your friends, chances are you're going to be less immersed.
Yeah,
you're gonna be less immersed, and so maybe it's kind of a goof off game, or maybe you've made it very clear to your players that you're doing a one shot that is uber game focused to completely escape from the world, and so setting kind of those standards and expectations at the beginning is good for any game, particularly if it's going to be long form. But I would say even more so right now.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that one thing about playing online is it gives people a lot more control of their comfort and space. It definitely like makes some extroverts lose out on like a little bit of that itch they're trying to scratch, but I feel like having people be able to control where they are, their comfort level, the ability to turn off their camera if they don't want to be seen, or the ability to distract themselves in case they have, like ADHD where they need a lot of extra uh, stimulation to stay focused, which is totally natural. So it makes it so it's not distracting to others, and it lets them kind of set their own scene for what they need. So that's a great inclusivity benefit to the online gaming, I think.
Yeah, and on the note of setting expectations before you get into a game or before you start a campaign, there's this great resource by Monty Cook Games called Consent in Gaming.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll link it in our document that we have with our tools and resources that we'll probably mention here and there.
Yes, at the end of the stream, we'll definitely put a focus on a link to a list of a Google Doc of resources we've all compiled together that are basically like pages you can go to for inspiration or buying goods, Kickstarters, Patreons, things like that that'll help your online play or learning more about the game itself.
On the topic of Monty Cook's consent guide, quickly, one of the advantages that I found to running in this environment is I was able to find that doc set up as like a Google form, and I just had my players fill it out, and then I have the spreadsheet with all their answers anytime I want to reference it. And it was a really easy way to collect that data.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it didn't take long for them to just go through it and mark the things.
Yeah, and they could even like edit it to change to be specifically to what they want and need.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect.
You'll love to see it. My next question that I had for us to discuss is the style of playing. So how do you think online play has changed the way that you DM games and play in games? Like what are the tricks you're using now, or what are you focused on as opposed to the things you used to?
So big changes for me. I'll start. Because you guys know that when I was running like kind of in person at Orcs especially, I spend a lot of time building like set pieces and making sure that like kind of the 3D terrain and stuff looks how I want it to look.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of time that I now have back. But now it's spent, kind of figuring out these digital assets. In terms of strengths and weaknesses, the biggest difference that I actually really like about running online is that if I do have something to show my players, like an image or a visual aid, like an NPC, something like that, they don't have to pass it around the table. I can just put it up, everyone can see it. And in most kind of role-playing software, it'll let them pull that up later if they want to like reference it again. And I'm finding that I'm using a lot more of those kind of visual aids than I used to, and maybe I'm a little less intensive on some of the maps.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of so I've been running two different things essentially. One is a long form Eberron campaign that was originally meant to be 5 sessions, and then we're still here, so we're just gonna go to level 20. And then I've been doing a lot of one shots that are very sort of orcsy, and so the one shots are to just goof off with friends and things like that. And so they are high levity, and not much has changed with that. There's a couple tricks that software and programs and things let you do, which is kind of an interesting way to reveal or to give new information or to give an immersion or an experience that you wouldn't normally have. The long form campaign is the most interesting thing that I've been doing, because I'm playing with everybody else in the campaign is a DM and has been for a while and does sort of take it seriously, right? Mm-hmm. So how can I turn things on the head for them? What challenges am I having because they are good and think outside of the box? So how can I say yes to a lot of that stuff? And trying to make it bigger and epic. So often in, I guess I'll say reality, we are we are confined by table space, and then you have to have drinks on that, and then room for dice, and then sheets of paper, and so your map can only be so big. Doing it online, you're confined by digital space, which is nearly infinite, so you can do bigger and more epic things, and give players an experience that they haven't had before. So that's what I'm trying, and it's going to, there's varying degrees of success, but the example that I'll give to the audience, the players went into the Mournland in Eberron, and I found a World War I battle map with trenches and things like that, and so I just blew that up and added fog assets on top of the players so that there was, to create a literal fog of war, so that it added to kind of the atmosphere and the scope of the world, which is so challenging to do, to translate and explain scope to people while you're sitting at a table. So trying to make things bigger right now is a really interesting opportunity that we have.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm liking playing around with it. Again, to varied degrees of success. So just know that you're experimenting. Get ready for mistakes.
That's all part of the process. Michaela, do you feel like your style has changed? Do you feel like your default is running online or running in person?
My default has been running online, mostly due to half of my regular gaming groups being on the East Coast while I'm on the West Coast. So that's just kind of been a consistent multi-day per week type of event that I got used to well before this. But I think what's changed most for me are the tools that I'm using now. I originally was running games pretty much exclusively through Discord, and so it was a lot of like text boxes sometimes, and theater of the mind. But now I'm doing more like screen sharing and sharing visuals like Dana mentioned, and have a little tablet now and can like draw little notes on maps, and that's been really fun. And I do love how visually accessible it is and that everyone can see it at the same time. So same page.
Yeah, for sure.
Michaela, I want to interrupt. Michaela, how were you doing dice rolls?
I have
beforehand.
When I started, we did different dice rolling bots in Discord, but we pretty quickly moved over to just rolling physical dice, even though people don't have dice cameras. I trust them. Sure. I know some people get a little touchy on that, but I think especially since so much of what we're doing now in the last 6 months, moving forward to who knows when, everything's digital. I'm staring at screens all the time, and just like holding dice and hearing them clickety clack around is like a really tactile immersion for me.
And having trust with your players is so important too. Like,
absolutely, I have the same policy. I just wanted to say I've had the opposite experience. Just very quickly, I gave all my players the option. I said, I don't care, how you roll. I trust you, and they all chose to use like the in-app rollers because there's kind of this trade-off where you don't have like the physical dice, but you do have kind of the shared joy or despair at the result. And that's what my group really chose. Law.
No, that's great. And I think that actually is going to get brought up in one of our questions later. One thing I like about the online play is it makes everyone be on the same page for like notes and shared documents for compiling information, things you've learned. You can much more easily like pass secret notes or communicate things mysteriously. Like, it's obvious if I fold up a piece of paper and hand it to someone at the table, but no one knows if I like slide a private DM to someone if that's a table. So that's kind of a fun twist. Or like if you're running like recently I did a charity game that was like a murder mystery, and one of the first things they got was a profile picture of like 12 different NPCs with a little information about each, and just having like these mug shots almost started telling a story about them before they had any way of guessing like what the who was responsible or who was who, and it was so easy to access because you could literally open it, look at it again, zoom in, or close it, and it was never something like getting in your way in your hands. So that was smooth. And before social distancing, we used to do a thing with some of my gaming groups where we'd have a blog online that we all had access to, and we could post like in between games. Basically, like our characters would have journals that they were writing in, so they could do like a flashback to their childhood or something that they're thinking about between sessions. And not everyone was great at it, but now that we're all online all the time, it kind of motivates them to do that more often. So you really get a lot of insight into the other characters at the table through like personal writing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Too.
I would love to do that.
And that's one of the things that for me is like one of my favorite changes that I've seen. And that's actually the next topic, is what specifically are some of your favorite changes, upgrades, or removing a hindrance that you've experienced in the past?
Well, for me, I bought a little D&D Beyond subscription
Nice.
so that I can make unlimited NPCs and characters. And I didn't realize how helpful that was until after I started, and now I'm just like, I'm just going to make like 20 characters today. That's fine.
Just do it for fun.
Yeah, that's definitely been my favorite upgrade that I've made.
Yeah, a quick shout out on that note. I played in one of Michaela's games on Discord near the beginning of all this, and D&D Beyond has some fun like integrations and things with platforms like Discord through some of their bots that are really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can be pretty extensive.
I'm learning a lot about players using it with its ability to sync up with Roll20 now too, as one program that's available out there, where you can literally just connect it to your character sheet, and instead of using the sheet through Roll20, you just have D&D Beyond in front of you, and every time you roll, it just interacts with the user.
Oh, that's dope.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. They were like, I'm going to do this, and I'd never heard of it.
I like the UI better on that too, so that would be perfect for me. I might have to try that out.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Dan?
We all make our ultimate decision on who to buy all our books again from.
Yes.
Yep.
Very much so.
I don't know if I have an answer that's good. I never did anything online. I never used Discord. I never did any of that until March. Because I resist and fear change.
Right.
And when you asked that, it threw me for a loop. I'm trying to think. The things that we've already spoken about, being able to do things bigger, being able to do a kind of more epic way of presenting the situation, and adding layers and sort of helping with surprises, I guess would be the answer. But there's trade-offs for all of them.
Can I have you mention the anecdote regarding the Labyrinth?
Oh, okay. So right now, my Eberron players are in a labyrinth. I was on the internet and found this map that is a maze. And there's other stuff going on with it. They're halfway through, so I don't want to spoil too much because law is in it. But I wanted to do a maze for ever since I started DMing, and I generally do things on a battle map because it lets me improvise a lot. And drawing out each section as they discovered it was just a pain. It was just a miserable experience, and so they got through the maze really fast and went. And then now that I've been playing around with Fog of War and being able to reveal things, it's a lot more interesting, and I think it's kind of a cool way to do the to have the players experience something that they haven't been able to experience before in a game, which is something I was really excited about. The things that I didn't think about. So this is where the trade-off comes. The things I didn't think about is how paranoid players will get, even if they're professional DMs that understand, how the game works. Is every single corner they are terrified of a trap or something because I set a standard, right? But then that's a great example of these players have stats that make them perfect for exploring and going around, while so-and-so brings up the rear. Well, that means so-and-so isn't doing much for that whole session. So it's something that I overlooked. And while we were doing it, and I realized that I kept trying to fix it and introduce things, but there's only so much that I had prepared in terms of digital assets that I could throw in.
Right.
And the players kept going the wrong direction.
Well, that's kind of the point of Labyrinth.
Just every time.
The thing is, I think it's impossible to give players things like a maze where you're revealing information in any format other than the kind of digital one. Because on the table, you're like folding pieces of paper to try to reveal things, and it's very messy. So there's some things we can do in this format that you just can't do in a normal table.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what about things that like? Oh, go ahead. Please finish.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, that really speaks to Fog of War, and then kind of jumping off of something you said earlier, Dan, about the kind of scale. I had an encounter recently where the party camped like a ways away from these ruins because they didn't want to get ambushed again. Mm-hmm. And some of them had gone in to scout it, and this kind of combat occurred. And if it was at a table, I would have to say, okay, everyone else can arrive at this combat in 2 rounds. But because we're playing online, I just made this gigantic map that if they dashed, they could get there in about 2 rounds. And it was interesting to see how different their behavior was.
That's a perfect example. Yeah, if you guys have any anecdotes, please throw them in. I'm just naturally trying to get momentum, but I want to hear your stories more than I want to get on to the next topic. So please.
Yeah, finding interesting ways to use mechanics that the players haven't thought of before, I think is my favorite thing, because the dash is a perfect example, and having them sort of experience that despair of rushing to help is great, and it's hard to do. Verticality is also interesting.
Yeah, verticality is a good point. But also, like, there's some kinds of classes, like, rogues and monks, where it's entirely possible in a normal battlefield to go from one end of the board to the other. And it kind of makes the world that much smaller. But you can literally just zoom out this giant map, and it feels like you're moving a great distance. So the scale is great. And there's some cost prevention too that I think is kind of there, because if you want to create an epic scene with a dragon that's literally the size of a building, that kind of miniature can be very expensive or a lot of work to fabricate and paint in the real world. But if it's just a PNG that you're dropping, you can get the scale and create that scene for them for essentially the cost of an internet connection and a functioning computer.
Yeah, I have an unused asset of a rock bird that is probably like a quarter to half the size of the battle map, and would have been amazing if they made that mistake.
Nice. That's also great for when characters, like grow larger, or you're like, I want this wolf to be the size of a bear. You can just literally click and drag, and then So what are things that you just genuinely dislike, you don't prefer about online play versus real play, if there are any?
Well, I would say that while I appreciate all of the tools, especially any kind of a player like journal add-on to a UE, wonderful. Handouts, wonderful. Whispers, wonderful. But just the act of playing with people, I feel like there's something missing compared to being in person, and just like occupying the same space and being able to read, all of their body language outside the confines of this narrow rectangle. And then also, just to get philosophical for a minute, I actually think that the most profound part for me is when the session ends, because in person there's kind of this like 15 minutes where everyone's gathering their things and just like chatting and kind of sharing in everything that just happened. And then online it's very like, oh, we're done, and then everyone disappears and they're gone, and you're sitting
Yeah.
at your desk by yourself.
Yeah. It's like not cuddling after,
Hey, this
No.
is PG-13.
Cuddling's very PG. I feel like in some games too, we kind of get that now before the game starts with online play, where literally everyone's like showing up randomly. Someone's gonna be 10 minutes late, and you're just talking about whatever came up in the past couple days because you know these people. So that's definitely a big shift, is not having that kind of personal moment. For us, some people go out and have like get some fresh air or a cigarette break or something. And some people go out for a meal or something afterwards or go to a bar for drinks. So you are getting a loss of that kind of special social connection with your players for sure.
Yeah. I'm really missing just like sharing space with people. Like all of those are very meaningful things, but like for me it just comes down to just being able to like sit across the table from people, which sounds kind of sad, but I love that.
Well, we're also all Orcs DMs, which means a good percentage of games that we play in person involve mostly strangers, mostly drunken strangers, and mostly high volume levels. These are all very key elements of orcs. Like I personally don't like it when people don't know touch me, and there's a lot of friendly drunk people who come up and grab your arm and tell you that they love you and you're great. So I don't miss that. I like having a very controlled bubble, but I'm also sensitive to like smells and things. So like everyone at the table has their own personality that's hitting my nose and stuff, but I have high sensory overload stuff. So having control of that's great, but I do miss. I don't know. I feel like you really see people. Maybe it was just because they were drunk at Orcs and they kind of let some of themselves out. But that's one thing you don't really get online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like getting drinks for each other. Can't really do that.
Yeah. I'm also a miniature fanatic, so I love using Photoshop and image editing, but man, do I love putting some cool minis down on the board.
Right. One change for me, this is completely off topic, but I always like kind of seek to find pieces that will delight my players. It can be like a cool mini or a cool battle map or terrain or something. And I've found that what I've done now is instead of doing stuff like that, I've actually like commissioned some custom art and things for like some of my players, and that's been really cool.
Yeah, this has been a great era for commissioning artists for like fantasy and finding new people that you never knew about for like short writings and stuff like that. It just seems so much easier to get your content out there as like a non-professional producer. But we are actually at 2:40 as far as our time. So I'm going to go through the questions that we got from some of the people who will be attending and also some just fans of Orcs, D&D in general. And I figure we can just each kind of give a pretty straightforward answer to each of them in whatever real order makes sense to us. So the first one I have, aside from our opening question, is from Lisa G, which says, should I use dice or an RNG online?
I'll start with saying I don't know what RNG stands for.
It's a random number generator.
Great. I think that explains my answer.
Apathetic.
But whatever is most convenient and accessible to you and fun.
Yeah, we covered this a little bit as a group earlier, but just it depends on the group, and I don't have a strong preference, and I don't think most like long-term DMs do either.
Yeah.
Whatever your players want, I think is great. If you can trust them, like I think most of us can. If you get the sense that people are, rolling 20 all the time, make them do it online. I do both in the 5 games that I'm in, and it's a mix, and it's all fine. I don't think that there's a right way or a wrong way. I like dice because I can attune to them and I can sleep with them under my pillow so that we become friends and I roll better. The computer is heartless and doesn't take into account my feelings when it rolls.
It's completely cold.
Yeah.
My preference, which doesn't necessarily matter, I'm more interested in what the players at the table want to see. But I personally like that cold, hard, emotionless computer because it puts everyone on the exact same playing field. Plus, I like having a record of everyone's rolls and having this, like Dana said earlier, the shared experience. Like when you see that big green 20 pop up, everyone gets super hyped. But I don't care if someone wants to roll in person. I think they should do what they feel best with. I do kind of like having everyone at the table on an even playing field in a way, like doing it the same way, but that's totally negotiable by all means. Everything at the table should be in some way negotiable.
Yeah, I didn't really understand your preference for doing it online when we started our game law. And I was just like, okay, yeah, that's fine if that's what you want to do. Like 2 weeks ago or a week ago is when you said shared experience and joining into the joy, and that made perfect sense to me. And so now I'm happy that we've been doing it that way.
Yeah, but again, whatever your people like.
Right, like my kids wanted to roll real dice because they're new to the game and they were super excited about like their dice sets that they owned, and so it's different.
There is a special connection you have with your dice, which is very special.
It's true. That's a lot of emotion. And on the topic of like trust when it comes to rolling physical dice, I personally think if somebody wants to fudge their rolls a little bit, if they're feeling bad one day and just really need that W, like, good. Sure. As long as it's not ruining the fun for everybody else.
That's true. That's a good point.
I agree. I'm going to do a 2-part question on the next one because they're very similar. We've got a few grouped ones. So the first one is from Mel W, which says, my friends don't play. Are there groups online that let new players play? And the other one is from Lizzle, which is, where can I find people to play with virtually?
Discord servers and subreddits.
2 great examples.
That's awesome. And jumping on what Michaela said, even if you don't have like a Discord server or something like that, just really any social media, I'm seeing even on a lot of like Facebook groups and things, like I'm in some in Portland, that aren't even necessarily related to gaming, but I see people in there saying like, hey, I need some D&D players, like would anyone like to join, because we have these other shared interests and you all seem cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think my response is, why don't your friends play?
Yeah.
What's their deal?
What's wrong with
and if they're resistant because it seems inaccessible or it's too nerdy or there's too much math or they don't like the fantasy theme and they hate dragons or something, there's plenty of other options that are either going to be a similar dice system or are going to take place in a different themed world, or you can just find a really simple storytelling game that's based on that. One of the orcs, Josh, we were talking about it on Monday, so I'll put the links that he suggested in there. But I want to do all 3 of these, and they seem like simple one-shot storytelling games where there's not math. Right. So if that's what's holding people back, something you can. I'm trying not to favor one.
It's a gateway
online video thing. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it.
And for me, like if your group wants to play but no one's done it before and you need a DM, to quote, I think it was Gandhi, be the DM you want to see in the world.
Yeah,
that's not obvious joke.
And just one very specific scenario related to that. If specifically somebody is nervous or afraid of, acting their character or speaking in front of people, there are just some little stylistic tricks you can do to help with that as well. Like on social roles, the kind of old school way to do it is to have someone kind of, say their speech or do their thing and then roll. You can always let them roll first and then help them kind of set the scene based on, if it was successful or not.
It's good. And start small. If you're gonna DM for the first time and it's going to be online and you're with players that have never played before, don't give them a textbook's worth of information on this world that you've built, because it's super overwhelming.
Yeah.
Keep things super generic. It's one of the things that we do at Orcs a lot, where we're getting a lot of new players that are interested. And the reason that they keep coming back those like first 5 times is because it's very much like a pickup game. here's the scenario. You got to defeat the bad guys. Okay, cool. All right, good job. And so you don't need to invest a lot of time to get started. You just start.
Absolutely. Our next question is from Jill Socks. Sorry if I said that wrong. It's a strange one. If a player's internet goes out, do you stop play or go on without them?
Ooh.
Go on without them more often than not.
I agree.
If they're in mortal peril, hold off and give them the agency to survive on their own. But if there's 6 other people on the screen, everybody kind of understands.
Yeah, you can always kind of, if it's a combat, skip over them, and then when they come back, you can always kind of return to their turn. Sorry, Michaela. And or if it's not combat, if it's a scene, you can focus on a different part of the scene for a minute and then come back to what they were doing. But I usually continue.
Yeah. I was just saying, in addition to like the situation in the game, group size is a big factor for me, because if it's just a game with like 3 players and somebody's gone, then it takes away a whole lot of the gameplay. But in big groups, like Dan said, if there's still 6 people in the call, like they'll probably keep things moving along.
Right. And it's a blessing that in this age of technology, it's likely that people you're playing with could have access to your cell phone number. So it depends on the urgency of the disconnect. So like if they have a power outage or they didn't pay their internet bill, they could text you, be like, this is bad. I probably won't be able to finish tonight. You can just kind of take over the character. But if it's like, my computer froze, I'm restarting, I'll be back in 5 minutes. You can play kind of thing.
Exactly. Make it a bio break.
Yeah, exactly. So I like this question. This is from GU Witch. What is one feature you wish could be added to online game sites, like Roll20, for example? I really like this one. See, it's a good thinker. Like it's a
good one.
Sky's the limit on this one.
I'm pretty happy with all my tools, but I also don't really use Roll20. So.
Sure.
Maybe you guys can help me, because maybe I'm doing it wrong. But macros is a thing that I don't have any desire to delve into or ask my players to do that.
Very optional.
And so so a lot of the customization is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability to do a quicker math roll where the computer's not doing it, not calculating numbers from places that are in the computer, but I know what the numbers are, because if I'm jumping between 6 different types of monsters, I don't have the time personally to upload every single one of those monster stats into a thing, particularly if it's a custom monster or something like that. So just being able to have like D20 plus 1, D20 plus 2, D20 plus 3, and just click on that button, so it's a lot faster, and I don't need to type. To have that modifier added in a single button, I think would be great, unless I'm using the wrong service and there's already 5 that do that I don't know about.
There's similar things, but for the most part, I feel like most of them require a very brief thing you type, like literally just / roll 1d20 plus 3 kind of thing.
Yeah, just something easier for players that are not spending as much time online and are easier to be accessible to newer players or more casual players would be something that I would be the most excited about. I'll see if I can think of another example.
Sure.
Yeah.
I feel like go ahead, please. You first.
D&D Beyond has a single click thing on your character sheets where it already counts those modifiers, and you just click the row that you want to roll, whether it's like an ability check or an attack or a spell, and it'll roll dice for you if you want it to.
Yeah, so Roll20 has it with the character sheets as well, and I think there's extensions that you can do to program them in. I think specifically, and maybe this is a very specific need, I'm playing with folks that either don't have a membership to this thing or the other, or don't have the time to plug this in online, and so it's a one-shot kind of thing, and so it's a very time thing. For our long-form campaign, absolutely no problem. But these sort of quick pickup one-shots, I think that it would be, I don't know, does it make me crazy?
No, I get it. Just so it's been really easy 1d20 plus 5 stuff when you don't want to do the interface with the character sheet.
Yeah.
I think some key binding would be really useful linked to your character sheet. Like a lot of computer games like World of Warcraft, Minecraft, Diablo, all of these ones have like 1 through 9 on your keyboard associated with something.
Yeah.
So I could be like, okay, so initiative is number 1 on this character sheet, 2 is my crossbow, 3 is my insight check, like the things you use most. That might just be kind of a fun way. And you could even link in a quick little animation, like the sound of a crossbow shooting, or I don't know.
That would be amazing. That would solve.
That would be super cool. But also, I feel like just off the page, like that's probably going to take more tech savviness than opening your web browser and clicking the button.
Absolutely.
God, I would. Anyway, you were talking about kind of video game sounds, and I'd love to make all my players just record like a getting hit noise.
Oh,
like,
hit folly.
Like, play it,
make it the text tones too.
Oh man.
Totally. Although you both mentioned that you play with kids, I feel like the temptation to hit the crossbow sound over and over.
Oh gosh, you're so right.
The table a little bit.
Oh, I'd try it once.
No, absolutely.
Okay, from the hip, not a question I'd previously thought about, but something that I'd really like to see, and I use Roll20, but in that platform specifically, the way that I do it, I do use a lot of the macros on both player sheets and monsters. Player sheets less so with adult players. But the way it has you do it is kind of minimize it down to a bar that you can place around the map, which is great. But then I have those all around the edges of my map. And I wish I could just make a tabbed view with the active map and like whatever sheets I want open so I can go around to my different monsters. The other thing, I don't know how to fix this, but the way that initiative works in Roll20 is you have to select your token on the board and then roll it. I wish there was a way to just say, you know, if this player ever does this without a token selected, there's a default. That's what I'd really like.
When you cast a spell, it asks you what level you want to do it. When you click initiative, it's do you want to link this to your token?
Oh yeah, even like that would be great.
So we've got 3 questions left. These were all some great answers. I like that question a lot. Thank you, GU Witch, for that one. It's a good thinker. So this one is from Reshbin, and this is regarding talking about the DMs who are now playing online instead of in person. Have they found online play to promote or deter theater of the mind?
Promotes it for me.
Okay, so it's a little different. Like I find when we're in person, and I'm putting down my water cup to say this, like there's also an element even with theater of the mind of you can say, you know, it's like this, and then this is here, and this is kind of how this stuff is. Online, you can use a whiteboard and draw it, but it's very different. I'm not prepared to say one is easier or harder because theater of the mind it has the least setup of all, you know, visualization of your games, but it definitely has kind of different strengths and weaknesses.
Any kind of atmosphere that you would use in person, so like a low music score or subtle lighting changes if you've got a dimmer or one of the remote control LED lights, that's super difficult to do unless you pop like an opaque filter over your map, maybe. The volume that you as a storyteller are using I've found sort of becomes more in the middle. It's hard to get up and use a lot of enthusiasm, and then if you're whispering, it can also be challenging to get picked up, because there's something very specific about being in person and having the acoustics just work that way, because you don't want to blow out anybody's microphone. You don't want to scream in their headphones or anything like that. So acting things out is super challenging. So a lot of it, using good online resources for maps or tokens or things of that nature is the best thing that I've found to help with it. And finding creative ways to utilize those, or maybe you pop a tree asset in there and it gets blown up, and so now you've got a stump there and you can just delete that asset. That could help, but short of having a prepared sort of written thing that uses a lot of atmospheric words, it's difficult to find tips and tricks for me.
Yeah. I mean, I personally feel like it doesn't change whether there's more or less. One thing I like about the online thing is, or even in person, you as the DM are kind of setting things up. Like, you're like, okay, everyone clear the board. We're putting down miniatures. It's clearly time for a combat. You're going to be measuring your movement. You're going to be using initiative. And as the DM online, you're showing the players, if you use an interactive map, when it's time to go to a fight. And sometimes people will, like, at the end of the fight, you'll still be like in the dungeon, and it'll be a role-playing time. You guys are talking about what just happened. You can take the map away and put like a world map or something non-interactive as a visual reference to remove the temptation to be like, okay, well, I'm going to go over to this room now, because you're like, no, we're not scooting the miniatures right now. We're just role-playing. So you can go there. You're in the room now. Mm-hmm. We don't have to measure this anymore. We're not in initiative. So you do have control of like the red light, green light of role-play versus combat time. So this one is from Tristan, and it's a two-parter, followed up by one from Nova Yankee. So Tristan asks, does Orcs lead public D&D meetups online? And Nova Yankee asks, what's the first spot Orcs is going back to after COVID? Now, this one's very easy to answer. The main answer is we're not currently doing any D&D meetups online. It's also not up to the four of us. If we went to Anthony and said, hey, we want to start doing games online and calling it Orcs, he'd probably be down, but it's not something that's actively happening. All of our plates are full of other things. And there's no set destination for the next Orcs. We can't really decide until businesses are fully open and people are regularly going out to do that kind of stuff. But follow us on social media. You'll be kept up to date on any changes with Orcs if new projects are coming up, or if businesses have been located. It used to be a game night lounge, but they went out of business, so that's not going to be there anymore. Very sad. But new horizons for Orcs are on the frontier. The next one is from Cheedar. Are there types of campaigns that work better on the internet? Are there new types of campaigns that you can only do on the internet?
I actually haven't looked into whether there's an RPG exclusively for internet play, but that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it made me wonder, because I don't know one off the top of my head either, but the odds of there being one seem kind of likely.
Yeah.
There's got to be some kind of Shadowrun situation, that is very tech centric, or could be contributed to, like it can only be done through chat, and that sort of helps the realism of the game.
That's an interesting idea. I don't know about a type of campaign yet that's... You know what? I'm just going to shout out, I have not really finished reading the rules to this game, but I know on Roll20 there is recently released a Roll20 exclusive game system called Burn Bright. And because it's Roll20 exclusive, I know that it has some features that are only for online, or can only be done online. And I can't really speak to it, but I think the answer's out there and people are starting to find it. And other than that, again, it's mostly just different. But on a lot of these platforms, if campaign books and things like that are available, if you purchase it, usually it does come with like the maps that are pre-set up and everything. And so if it has a lot of like mega dungeons and things like that, that can be a lot easier than redrawing a map on a battle mat or something like that.
I'd say a key component is investment into the online play. Like I don't, like I said, I don't know of any games that are specifically online only, but I would say that if you're involved in a campaign that's been going online for a year and all of your time and investments have gone into 2D resources, everyone has like commissioned character art, everyone has a really in-depth character sheet, all your maps and histories are saved in some kind of interface. Switching to in-person would probably be more work than just continuing online, even if that's what you wanted to do. So there could be some that go so far that they're kind of stuck being online to keep going.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that okay, I'll be fast.
No, go ahead.
Kind of on that note, if the book is not available or you don't want to buy the book for whatever reason, what I did years and years ago in like 2015 when I was running Princes of the Apocalypse is I was using a virtual tabletop, and you'll find that a lot of the artists that draw these maps oftentimes sell high-res copies of their map assets from the book, like through their personal websites and things for like a few dollars.
Yeah, which is a great way to throw some extra money at the artists.
The exclusive to the internet RPG is the most intriguing thing I've heard all week. And I'm super excited by the idea. So the initial thing, maybe like a Western Marches type situation where you have 15 different players that play 3 to 5 at a time and jump in and out and sort of do a big world and theoretically build the map as you go as an online asset if you're in, and so everybody's kind of in charge of world building and swapping DMs. That might be an interesting, it wouldn't be online only, it would just be online convenient because you can throw your buddy from the East Coast in.
Well, and like I know you're big into like hands-on puzzle things.
Yeah.
Like a very specific, like, okay, here's a campaign we're doing, but you have to access this particular browser page while you're playing. And it's covered in like little places where you put in codes or unlock things that reveals new information. And the arc of the entire campaign would be opening up new parts of this URL where you become aware of new things. And if you didn't have access to the internet to do that, you couldn't be able to play and progress that part.
Yeah, I think that would be, that's why I was thinking kind of a Shadowrun.
Yeah, it could have like
where it leans
like
into it.
like a thumb pad kind of thing.
So
yeah.
Shadowrun, real quick, there used to, well, actually it was kind of re-released differently, but there was an MMO at one point called The Secret World, and there was a web browser because it's a modern game like built into the MMORPG UI, and I think that they did some stuff in game solving some puzzles with, you know, kind of some fake URLs and things that you'd uncover and go visit, I think. But if not, I invented it. And something like that for a Shadowrun game could be very cool too, like putting up some custom pages for that purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's even board games that'll be like, okay, now go to this browser and this is your problem. Here's the thing that comes up. But I'm going to wrap with the last kind of 3-part question from 3 different members, and then we can all close with any closing statements we have about playing online versus in person. And if you want to do any quick plugs for yourself, things you've worked on recently or you're working on in the near future. So Tiny Vampire 11 asks, are there books or websites that you recommend to get ideas? Skeleton Queen asks, any shops you recommend for getting D&D supplies online? And Andrew the Invisible asks, do any of the DMs use virtual tabletops like Roll20? And if they do, what recommendations do they have for those of us starting out in the milieu? And we did, again, collect a Google document that Michaela started of some of our favorite online resources. We can still add stuff to it, so it could grow, but we will try to make sure that that's visually or clickably available to the people watching the stream. And you can see some of the stuff that we put down that we've been using either during the COVID social distancing or before. So hopefully that's a good access and resource for all of the people who have those kinds of questions from us in particular. So yeah, any closing statements or thoughts on the overall topic, self-promotions?
Yeah, in regards to that document we have, I do want to spotlight one link that I'm including, which goes to the Accessibility and Tabletop Resources by Jennifer Kretschmer.
Mm-hmm.
And it has so much content in it and so many links to blogs and articles and like dyslexia-friendly character sheets and just all sorts of things. So accessibility is super important. Especially considering we have to do everything virtually now. So give that a look, and it will improve your table in some way or other.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great resource with a lot of work put into it.
Yeah. But that's all for me. What about you two?
I'll jump in. So those last three questions, I have a lot of opinions about. And I think what I'll do is write a thing and put it in the doc in terms of like where to get ideas from it. Like I'm about to recommend a movie called Unfriended: Dark Web, which nobody saw and was not as bad as you would think that it would be. Which there was a very specific inspiration, which has tied me into this exclusively online thing. So ideas come from the strangest places. So consuming content might give you a spark of an idea that will turn into a completely different thing for your situation, which is probably a great way to go in terms of creativity. So I'll write up a thing because I'm super excited about that. My personal plugs, puzzlingpackage.com. You get a box. There's stuff in that box that has clues and tells a story, and there's items that you can keep and stick on your mantle. And so you solve a puzzle by yourself or friends, you try to figure out what the mystery is and what the puzzle is, and then at the end of it, you get stuff that looks really cool on your shelves. Our new game is coming out in under a month called The Runes of Odin, where you learn about rune casting and a little bit of Norse mythology and things like that. You get a drinking horn that has a stand. You get some rune stones. Everything is created to look authentic and age appropriate, and most of it's handmade, which is pretty great. Check us out if you like puzzles and you want to play games and you're sick of sitting at home staring at each other in the face and you want to do something else.
Wow, I think Anthony would say that sounds dope. That sounds really cool. I'm amped up by that.
The asset is lovely too. The horn is part of the puzzle too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to everything has a purpose.
Awesome.
I love that.
That's cool. I might have to look at that. But I'm not sure I can speak to where I get ideas from. I agree with Dan. It's especially like consuming content, like consuming media, movies, books. They can come from all these places. In terms of where I source things, I'll admit when I first started on Roll20, I probably spent way too much money like buying up like a library of digital assets that I kind of use. But my recommendation would be absolutely find some artists that make maps on especially Patreon, because you can kind of find the ones that really jive with the style that you like. And then for, less than buying like a $200 map pack, just kind of subscribing, $5 a month, $10 a month, you can get access at kind of a lower starting point to some very, very beautiful work.
Yes.
And I find consistently that that's like my favorite place to source some of my digital assets from. Personal plugs. You can see at the bottom of my screen here. You can look me up on Twitter at Mr. Stana RPG. If you want to talk about any of this stuff, I'd love for you to just like tweet me or like throw me a DM. I give a lot of tips about gaming in general. If you kind of scroll back on my feed past all the dice pictures that I retweet, you can find a lot of like small tips that I've kind of thrown out there. I also have a website, dmdana.com. Please look me up. I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Yeah, most of the things that I thought would be good resources, I tried to remember to put on our Google Doc. Some of them are, in fact, Patreons with some nice maps for a very affordable price. A couple of them are friends of mine that make online, like the printable miniatures you can use on the table, but they also are really good for online resources, like Printable Heroes and Trash Mob Minis. Both wonderful people. I guess one of my big comments on playing during the social distancing is a lot of us are utilizing a lot more online content, digital artwork, fantasy art we pull down. I'd like to remind people that I think the best thing you can do to thank the people who made those is be mindful of crediting all of the people that you use resources from. Share them with your friends by name if you have the option. If you're not throwing down money and just doing Google searches for artists, I mean, try to make sure people know where that art came from when you can. I think that's valuable for the creative minds behind them. And of course, when you can buy art, do. That's what's keeping some people alive right now. Same with game assets. And if you need a DM really bad and you know some that are doing it professionally like we do, throw them a couple bucks. You'll play a really good game. There's a reason they charge for it because they're good at that. But yeah, my little plug is I'm Law Johnson. I'd love it if you checked out the League of Ultimate Questing. Recently, we've reached the top 20 gaming podcasts in the US. It fluctuates a lot, but it's pretty cool. We have a really great Discord with all the fans. We're very active. We have another panel that's part of the Awesome Quest thing. I think ours is on Friday. I don't remember. They'll advertise it normally. Also, Dana was a guest in a couple of episodes. We've also got D20 Questions, which had Michaela as a guest in one of those episodes. So I want to thank the other three panelists. You guys are awesome DMs. I love hearing your opinions. I'm glad that we can be resources for each other and create some guidelines for people who have these questions. I couldn't have picked a better squad to chat with.
Yeah, 100%. And real quick, before we do wrap up, I'm Michaela. Twitter's McBits42, and my website is michaelaabel.com, and that's where you can go to find all of the panels and streams and charity events that I'm doing. Or just, hit me up on Twitter. Let's talk about D&D.
Nice. Yeah, and please follow Orcs. Without them, none of us would know each other, and this wouldn't be possible. Mm-hmm. So they're still growing. They will return to the real world when the time is right. But yeah, thank you all for your time, and reach out to us personally for questions. We'd love to talk to you.